My name is Aurora Hayes, and the notification on my phone made my chest tighten. My parents had sent a message in the family group chat. "We think you're a disgrace. Stay away for now." Even my aunt reacted with a thumbs up. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. The sting of rejection was familiar, but I refused to let it control me. I typed calmly, "Understood. I'll respect that and step away from the family." For years, I had been their scapegoat, the one who carried their criticism, their disappointment, their constant judgment. And for years, quietly, I had built a life they didn't notice, a life that didn't depend on their approval. That night, I reviewed my plans, my savings, and the small victories I had stacked over time. Every careful choice I had made, every step I had taken, had led to independence, security, and control, things they had assumed I could never achieve. Their message, meant to shame me, had done the opposite. It lit a spark. Stepping away didn't mean defeat. It meant reclaiming power. And quietly, without fanfare, I was about to show them they had underestimated me all along. Everything they thought they knew about me was about to change. The next morning, the tension in the family was almost tangible, even from a distance. Messages from distant relatives trickled in, awkward, polite, cautious, but my parents stayed silent. Their quiet carried more weight than any angry words ever could. I went about my day as usual, sipping coffee, checking emails, and mapping out my plans. Calmness had become my shield. Their judgment no longer dictated my mood or my choices. For years, I had bent myself to fit their expectations, but now I moved deliberately, untethered and confident. By evening, whispers started circulating indirectly. A cousin mentioned, "Did you see what Aurora's been doing?" I smiled softly. They assumed I would react, assume anger or fear. But I had already taken careful, unseen steps to secure my independence and strengthen the life I had quietly built. That night, I sat at my desk reviewing months of planning. Their message, intended to wound, had done the opposite. It had freed me, ignited a quiet determination, and set in motion a shift they hadn't anticipated. Everything they thought they knew about me, and everything they assumed I couldn't do, was about to change. Over the next few days, the subtle shifts in the family's behavior became impossible to ignore. Relatives who once echoed my parents' criticisms now approached cautiously, almost nervously. My parents themselves remained silent, their control slipping with every passing moment. I moved through my days with quiet purpose. I didn't need to argue or defend myself. Every small victory I had quietly built, my savings, my independence, my accomplishments, spoke louder than any confrontation ever could. They had assumed I was powerless, dependent, and fragile, but their assumptions were wrong. That evening, a cousin leaned in to ask, "Aurora, how are you managing all this?" I smiled, letting the question hang in the air. They didn't need the answer. My life, my choices, and my calm certainty had already done all the explaining. Sitting by the window, watching the city lights flicker, I felt the weight of years of dismissal and judgment lift. Their assumptions, their attempts to control me, had only revealed my strength. Everything they had underestimated, the patience, the planning, the quiet determination, was now the force that would define my life. By the middle of the week, the ripple effects of my quiet defiance were clear. Even distant relatives approached differently, with hesitation and a newfound respect. My parents' silence was louder than ever, a constant reminder that the power they thought they held had begun to slip. I moved through my routines deliberately, work, planning, small victories, each step reinforcing the independence I had fought to build. Their judgment no longer mattered. For years, I had endured criticism, dismissal, and manipulation, but now I acted with purpose, untethered from anyone else's approval. That evening, I reviewed the careful plans I had been executing in secret. Every choice I had made, every step I had quietly taken, was paying off. The life I had constructed for myself was secure, unshakable, and beyond their influence. For the first time, I understood the true power of calm determination. They had assumed fear, anger, or submission would follow their message, but I had given them none. I had given myself the life they could never control. Everything they believed about me, their influence, their authority, their control, was quietly dissolving. And I was ready to step into a future defined entirely on my terms. By the end of the week, their unease was unmistakable. My parents tried subtle probing, texts, questions through relatives, even casual comments, but I didn't react. I let my actions speak. I moved through my day with quiet precision. Each decision, each plan I executed, was a statement of independence. Every small victory I had stacked over the years, my savings, my accomplishments, my control, was proof that I didn't need their validation. A cousin approached me, curious and cautious. "Aurora, how did you manage all this?" I smiled softly. Words weren't necessary. They already saw it. My calm certainty, my deliberate choices, and the life I had built quietly, without anyone else's approval. That evening, I reviewed everything, plans, achievements, and the steps I had taken to secure my future. The truth was undeniable. I had created a life untouchable by their criticism, untethered from their control, and stronger than anything they had expected. For the first time, I felt a sense of freedom I had never known. Their attempts to dictate my life, to shame or belittle me, had only strengthened me. Every assumption they had made about my power, my resilience, my independence, was now appended. Everything they thought they controlled was slipping away, quietly and irrevocably. By the following week, the shift in the family dynamic became impossible to ignore. Even casual relatives treated me differently, cautiously, almost with awe. My parents' silence grew heavier. They no longer held the influence they assumed they had. I moved with deliberate purpose, every action measured and precise. My career, my finances, and my personal victories were proof of a life built without anyone else's approval. For years, I had endured dismissal and judgment, but now I acted with quiet authority, untethered from their expectations. That evening, as I reviewed my long-term plans, I felt a deep satisfaction. Every small decision I had made in private, the careful budgeting, the unnoticed achievements, the quiet steps toward independence, was now the foundation of a life they could no longer control. Even when my parents tried subtle manipulations or indirect questions, I remained calm. Their attempts to provoke a reaction failed. I had built resilience, patience, and foresight into my life, and those qualities had quietly become my strength. Everything they had underestimated, the strategic planning, the inner resolve, the quiet determination, was now reshaping the family's perception. And for the first time, I realized just how unstoppable I had become. By the end of the month, the shift in power was undeniable. Relatives approached with caution, my parents' attempts at authority faltered, and even casual acquaintances treated me with respect I had never received before. I moved through each day deliberately. Every decision I made, every step I took, reinforced the independence I had quietly built. My life, my accomplishments, my security, my control, stood firmly in place, untouchable by anyone else's judgment. That evening, I reviewed my achievements, both big and small. Each one was a testament to years of resilience, careful planning, and quiet determination. I realized something important. The life I had always wanted wasn't just possible, it was already mine. When my parents tried indirect manipulation, subtle guilt, or veiled threats, I remained steady. They assumed I would bend, but their assumptions were wrong. I had learned patience, strategy, and the strength of self-reliance, and now those lessons define me. As I looked out at the city skyline, I felt the full weight of freedom for the first time. Their control, their judgment, their influence, all of it had quietly slipped away, leaving only the life I had deliberately crafted for myself. Everything they had underestimated about me, the quiet strength, the foresight, the independence, had now become undeniable. The day finally came when my parents realized just how far they had miscalculated. I hosted a small gathering to celebrate a personal milestone, a project I had built entirely on my own. Invitations went out, but they were noticeably absent. I watched from a distance as messages circulated in the family group chat, confusion and disbelief growing with every notification. Their silence had shifted into desperation, an unspoken acknowledgement that the control they once had was gone. I moved through the evening with calm confidence, every smile, every gesture a quiet assertion of the life I had claimed for myself. I didn't gloat. I simply existed in the reality they had ignored, a reality I had carefully and deliberately built. By the night's end, the message was clear. I was no longer defined by their judgment or approval. Every assumption, every criticism, every attempt to control me had failed. I had proven to myself, and quietly to them, that independence, patience, and determination could achieve what anger and manipulation never could. As the last guests left and the city lights twinkled below, I felt a deep, unshakable satisfaction. Everything they had tried to deny me, the strength, the independence, the life they assumed I couldn't build, was now undeniable.